Alright. 2 of umpteen one-make races have now been cleared, and as you may have guessed, I have a bit more money now because, well, I did my typical Capri rally grinding tactics, because I needed more money in order to do the next few events. And because I keep winning this car, I figured it would be pretty stupid for me to keep winning this car and then to not drive it at least once for grinding purposes. Just so I at least had some leverage behind what will pretty much be essential for the near future. Because I will probably have to do this a few more times before it's all over. But either way, we're up to less than 1 million credits now, and I think that should be more than enough to get me through probably the next 5 events. Also, after looking back through my video files, I've now made 1.6% of progress already. So from the Alpine Cup we did, that was worth 1.1%. And already that tells me we are definitely making good progress. So we're going to head over to the UK and Aston Martin, and we have a choice of 3 cars we can use here. We can either use the DB7, the DB9, or the Vanquish, which is the car that everyone knows from the James Bond film Die Another Day, or from the 2002 video game James Bond 007 Nightfire, which I have personally played. And there is quite a price differential between each of these cars. So I think for this, initially I was wanting to use the DB7, but because I want to make sure that I am being reasonable here, I think I'm going to use the DB9, just because it makes more sense. And as for the colour I'm going to use this thing in, well, I kind of want to go traditional here and use green. But I also quite like Sutherland red as well. Yeah, you know what, we'll get this thing in British Racing green. I think it makes more sense, considering I am technically a Brit myself, as this thing also has a V12. I just figured I would buy this car because this car seems like, you know, the right balancing act between the two, and also because, well, I think this event is going to be pretty easy, considering we only have 3 races to do. I don't think tuning is required, so I think we should be okay for this, as we only need a B license in order to enter this event. Those are the eligible cars, and we only got 2 grand from winning each of these races, but that's because these races are pretty short, as we've got 2 laps around 90s Fuji, 3 laps around Hong Kong, and 2 laps again around Autumn Ring. A thrilling race that is a quintessential part of British Gran Turismo, as is TVR. Okay, enough talk. Let's go and do the racing. So, we've got 2 Vanquishes, 1 DB9, 1 DB7, and 1 V8 Vantage. I think from what I can see, we should be okay with this. We shouldn't have too many issues from what I can see. I will keep the traction control on just because I think this thing might be heavy. But as for the other two, I think I should be okay. From what I established from doing my research on the Aston Martin festival, I think it should be pretty easy. But we'll see how we go. Hopefully this works, or maybe it doesn't. But whatever. The DB9 was the cheapest car I could buy, so... And 81 points if we win. Although I would imagine this is probably not going to be too hard for me to work my way to the front, as I'm already getting pushed by the other Vanquish. And getting past the leading Vanquish pretty quickly. And I think it's suffice to say, this is going to be pretty easy, from what I can understand, as we're already into the first left-hander. And yes, there technically is a chicane here. I don't think there is many other racing games that have the 90s variant of Fuji Speedway, aside from this game and GT4 Prologue. I should also mention that partly the reason why a lot of people know Aston Martin is because aside from it pretty much being involved in racing pretty much 24/7, it also is widely recognised because of most James Bond films that have been released since Goldfinger. And if anyone wants to know how the DB5 became so iconic, well, that's pretty much where that whole thing started off. Even though I should mention Sean Connery was a Scotsman. And I'm also pretty sure around that time, just as Bond was becoming popular, one of the best British-aired TV shows during that time in the 60s, I believe, was called The Saint. And that technically had the upcoming James Bond following Sean Connery full-time, because George Lazenby only did a one-off. And that was Roger Moore, who under the circumstances was initially supposed to do On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but that was handed over to George Lazenby instead, because during that same time they were airing the final season of The Saint, which aired from 62 to 69. And he did also get to drive a few fast cars in the process during that show. I couldn't tell you what the main character is called in The Saint, but I do know that prior to James Bond, that was how people recognised Roger Moore. And also by the fact that he was technically one of the first actors to put his name on the scene of ITV. Because technically he was one of the first people to put his name on the list of ITV actors. He was definitely one of the earliest, I'm sure of that. Anyway, just me rambling at the moment about how Aston Martin is recognised because of Bond, and everyone just managed to finish in the end. So I beat the leading Vanquish in the end by 11.2 seconds, I think that's right. And then it was the other DB9 that finished third, followed by the Vantage in fourth, then the DB7 fifth, and the other Vanquish was last. Pretty interesting, and also pretty good. On to race 2. And this time we've got 2 DB7s with 1 DB9, 1 Vanquish, and 1 Vantage. If the previous race has taught me anything, I think these races are going to be pretty easy, even if the A-Spec point scores don't exactly tell the full story of knowing if whether or not an event is actually going to be challenging. But if the first race has taught me anything, it's that I think I am probably going to win these other 2 races about as easily as I won the first one. As I'm already on the outside of the DB7, who tries to block me, but he is not successful, as I do get the side draft on the corner exit, and now I just have to focus on the rest of the field. Currently 4 seconds to the leading Vantage, but it's not going to take me too long to close that gap, as I am closing in on the other DB9. And I boffed the back of the DB7. That was not intentional, that was totally an accident. There's hardly any room to run here in Hong Kong, so once you do get in trouble, there's not really much you can do about it. You basically just have to hope that you're not putting yourself in a dangerous position. And I sell the dummy to the Vanquish, and I sell myself the dummy by hitting the wall. But from what I can see here, the Vantage doesn't look to be pulling away too much, so I think I should be able to catch him as I go on the inside of the Vanquish, who is trying to block me off, but is not going to do it. And now I have to close that gap to the Vantage because he is at the front. And I think it's a bit of a mixed bag with Hong Kong in terms of knowing if the AI really have any lasting advantages here. I would personally say no, but there are some people who would probably say yes because, well, I have been beaten at Hong Kong twice before, at least when it comes to longer races. Although one of those occasions was because, well, my tyres were completely shredded. And trying to leave him running room, because I want to make sure I get past him cleanly, or at least try to. Give him a little bump from behind, nothing sinister. Trying to see if I can do the dummy trick again. I go up the inside, and just like that, I am into the lead, ahead of the V8 Vantage. As now, I can pretty much just tear myself away from the Vantage now because I have the lead, and because I am in the lead, it means that I am pretty much going to stay up front. As I hit the outside wall again. I thought about using the DB7 at first, but because I discovered the DB9 was 30 grand shorter, it was a much more prudent investment for me to take the DB9 over the DB7, because then I would have more money to spend on the other cars I use in the upcoming events. That was pretty much why I chose the DB9. I'm also pretty sure, if I remember correctly, the DB9 is known for something else, because there was one time where, like a certain Maserati, it did dominate the GT racing scene. Although I couldn't tell you what it was called at the time, but I know there's definitely the DBR9, which did manage to achieve a ton of success in its racing days in the 2000s. And there we go. Pretty easy win once I took the lead, and winning in the end by 6 seconds over the Vantage. And is everyone going to finish? Yes, they do. They finish right before the fade. So another 2 grand is ours. And now, I think is a good time to save another replay. And also because I am doing it for something else, which you may or may not see next week, depending on what time you watch the video. Okay, replay is saved, and now we shall go to Autumn Ring for the final race of the Aston Martin Festival. And this time we've got 1 Vanquish with 1 DB7, another DB9, and 2 V8 Vantages. Let's go and do it. So 83 points again, although I'm pretty sure altogether these races have been pretty easy so far, so I don't think this one is really going to be any different, to be honest. It's pretty much going to be the same as what I have done before, up to this point, as I run wide through the first hairpin, and now heading through the bus stop, as I am still behind the Vantage, and now I take over 5th, and now looking for 4th. A little bump on the inside there, but nothing intentional. And shifting down to 1st gear because of how slow the corner is. Not really needing to push too hard at this stage, because pretty sure I am going to win with relatively little trouble here. I will say the prize winnings are pretty small compared to the amount of money that these Astons are really worth. It's a little bit short, but then again, a lot of these races often do tend to have short prize winnings by comparison to the much bigger prize winnings you get from both the endurance events and also from the Formula GT World Championship. Which, by the way, yes, without question, will pretty much be the final championship we do in this game. Pretty much bar none, because, well, number 1, it's the longest championship, and also because number 2, we have to win one of the 24-hour events in order to get a Formula GT. But hopefully by the time we get to the Enduros, I should have enough money to not need to do my Capri Rally grinding tactics again. At least I hope I won't, but we'll see. As I've already got a pretty clear advantage now. Over, I think it's the, yeah, it's still the Vanquish. And if there is one thing that I will say about Aston Martin, unlike most of the car brands today, it's that they refuse to give up the very heart and soul of what makes them so hugely loved by petrolheads pretty much the world over. Because they pretty much refuse to sell the heart and soul. Unlike most of the exotic car brands, they pretty much refuse to sell their identity. Plus they do have the right people in charge as well, which also helps. So 5.37 seconds over the Vanquish, then the DB7 was third, ahead of the DB9, and the two V8 Vantages finished at the back. So really not much of a performance swing between each of these cars. Still could have used the DB7 if I wanted to, but the price hike, it was just enough to pull me away from buying the DB7 over the DB9. Anyway, we win another DB9, and we get this thing in gold. This thing is quite literally gold. I'm also pretty sure this is the special colour model as well, if I remember correctly. How can you not love this prize? It just feels so perfect when you look at it. It's honestly so perfect, I might even consider using it for one of the Enduros if I'm in the mood for it. But anyway, that's the AM Festival now done, and our first and only event done at Aston Martin. Now let's go and look at our special colour, DB9. As we've gained 59.4%, so already at this point, we are basically 2% up on where we started. And I'm just going to make this easy, because why not? And we get this thing in Super Gold! Special colour. And if we wanted to, we could sell this thing for virtually 35 grand, but because of how awesome this thing is, there's no way in hell I am selling it. It just goes so hard with this car, it really does, and that's probably why I love it. Okay, that's enough of me staring at that, as I have now driven nearly 3,100 miles. As I clean swept the Aston Martin Festival. And next time we will be heading to Audi to do another championship. Which one? Stay tuned to find out.